Welcome out, one and all. Welcome out, one and all. This is a BPM special. I am the Air Doctor, and today we have some hosts that's going to bring you the most. Let me introduce them to you. We have no other than Dr. Jared Ball and Coco and Kalanji Chama Chunga.
What's going on? We
And last but not least, let's bring in no other than Dr. Cornel West.
What a blessing, y'all. Let me get centered
Greetings.
in the
What's up,
right
sir?
way. Lord. I'm still swinging. How y'all doing?
Hey man, we try to be as cool as you, man. You think we'll get there or what?
Oh, shoot. I've been trying to catch up with you so long, I might as well give up and still be satisfied. You know what I
Oh man, we gotta go backwards to catch me.
mean?
Good to see you,
Oh,
brother.
it's a blessing to see all three of y'all.
Yes.
Jared put it on my mind and listened to Suffer a little bit, the song that Donny Hathaway and Curtis Mayfield wrote together. The jam was so cold. I hadn't heard it in 25 years, man. The only song they wrote together.
Wow.
It's crazy. I don't remember. I didn't know about it before you mentioned it last time. So I just say that again.
Yeah. That's
so
a rare thing. It's a rare thing. Indeed. How my dear sister doing?
And I don't know, Dr. West, if you all have met Coco. This is
Sister Coco, right?
Yes, indeed.
Yes. Yes,
And
doing that?
I'm doing all right. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. Yes.
It's a blessing to see you. You know, with these two high quality brothers here, Lord, none of us can go wrong. None of us can go wrong.
Oh, you already know.
and you too, though. You too, Sister Coco.
Hey,
Ain't no doubt about it.
They say two wrongs don't make a right, but we're gonna make it right today. How about that?
so if we start where you sort of began with us with this reference to Suffer by Mayfield and Hathaway, there's clearly a lot of suffering going on in the world, and 2 weeks removed from our last visit with you, as you endeavor to alleviate the suffering in the world, one of the questions that still is reverberating, that I think if we could pick up sort of where we left off in sort of a sense, is how do you see beyond this campaign per se, is your intervention in electoral politics going to move us to another level of struggle to alleviate that suffering? If we could start with something like that there. Yeah, appreciate you.
No, indeed. No, I deeply appreciate you all and that question, because I think we live in such desperate times that we have to do all that we can to both bear witness and engage in a collective praxis to keep alive the bloodstained banner, I should say, of both critiques and resistance. We have to provide, especially for the younger generation, examples, very concrete examples, collectively and individually, of standing up in the face of empire, predatory capitalism, especially white supremacy, male supremacy, and so forth. And it means to make available an analysis of structures and institutions, to make available a larger vision, and then to ground it in actual deeds and words and praxis and insurgency and counterinsurgency. And so this campaign is just a little moment within this much larger international movement that we need to be able to keep alive. And as you know, and I'm always deeply dedicated. Oh, we got my other brother here. I'm sorry I didn't see you. Good to see you, though, brother.
I'm doing good, my brother. I'm sorry for my tardiness. Don't stop because of me. I'm gonna jump
I
in.
looked up and said, oh, there's our brother there. The person's family we saw last time. But especially the immeasurable, invisible, and spiritual impact it has on a hated, terrorized, and traumatized people. And that's why when we start off with Curtis and Donnie, and it's just called Suffer. That's just the name of the record. You know what I mean? but it's very mellow because it's got to have that immeasurable, invisible spiritual impact on the souls of Black people that are inseparable from the bodies, the communities, the flesh, the institutions, the structures, and so forth. And so in that sense, you know, this candidacy really is just a certain kind of political enactment of what the best of Black music is all about, which is the truth telling and the justice seeking and the soul giving and the joy sharing. I mean, that's the history of our people, it seems to me, at its best, in the face of overwhelming Goliath-like conditions for 400 years.
When, you know, I had we appreciate that, had your comrades Jill Stein and the Jamu on last week, right?
I saw that wonderful down, but you know, it's hard to hear you, my brother. Do you have it all the way up?
Yeah, can you guys hear me, or is it just me?
I hear you.
You can hear me well, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
You don't hear me?
I'll lean
speak
in a little bit.
louder.
That's cool.
Okay.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
that
yeah.
was a wonderful show, though, brother. Wonderful.
I appreciate you checking it
marvelous.
out. I'm glad I wasn't talking junk since I knew you was watching it. I wanted to ask you, you know, because of course I know you've been catching flack from different folks in regards to, okay, you're running a third party campaign, and of course the Democrats, many of them are losing their minds. They're like, oh, you know, you're gonna take away from the Democrats, as if the Democrats has done anything for us, you know, since their since their inception. I wanted to ask you, do you feel your candidacy will have a impact for future third party candidates? And is your intent to kind of strengthen that side of the program or platform? Or I mean, how do you see this? Because I know that, you know, we know that you are a thinking man, so we know that you're going beyond just yourself as an individual. So what do you see in this campaign coming out for possible third parties?
You know, it's very interesting because so many of the people who say that I'm quote unquote a spoiler, as if any politician has ownership over people's votes, like they run in some kind of political plantation and people have a debt to them because they run in the thing. But their concern is fascism, and I am profoundly anti-fascist, just like I'm profoundly anti-white supremacist, anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist, and so forth. But I think what they don't see is the underside of the Democratic Party, the underside of the Biden administration that has fascist-like effects and consequences on people. See, if I start looking at America through the lens of mass incarceration, it looks like a police state. If I look at America from the vantage point of the hood, it looks like occupation of foreign forces in one's community. If I look at America through the lens of West Bank, it looks like it supports unequivocally apartheid. So that it's a matter of trying to get both the American people and the world to look at lenses that are so qualitatively different than the lens they ordinarily look at the world. And it's not to trash them or to say you hate them and everything. They're just so narrow, they're so truncated, you see, and they need to be broadened. And so in that sense, for me, it's really a question of trying to get folk to see that that Biden is pushing the world to a third world war, and Trump is pushing the country toward a second civil war. And both of those are catastrophic, thoroughly catastrophic. And yet, you know, you have to be able to make a case that that needs to be taken seriously. Most people in the United States, they have Merocentric lens. So they, you know, the West Bank doesn't mean that much to them. Suffering Palestinians doesn't mean that much to them. The suffering of what goes on under the policies of AFRICOM doesn't mean that much to them. We had to broaden it so they can see things that they ordinarily don't see, and they can hear the cries of oppressed folk in places that they ordinarily don't listen to and take it in. And that's one of the roles, I think, of trying to engage in a kind of political education in the process of a campaign, which ain't nothing but a moment in a larger overarching movement, which is in no way confined to just the USA, but it's connected to Latin America, Caribbean, Africa, Asia, the best of Europe, and so forth.
Definitely appreciate that.
Brother West, I do have a question. You know, I know by no means is, you know, you're running with the Green Party, you know, the absolute solution, right, to our
That's
issues
right.
here. But what are your thoughts on, you know, a potential socialist society here in the United States? If there, you know, ends up being a United States, or for any, you know, African people who might want, you know, to see the ends of imperialism and capitalism. And especially now that we see, like, even in Florida, right, this like so-called this warning that was put out that, you know, socialists and communists are not welcome. But like, what are your ideas as someone who, you know, is running for president, and, you know, as far as pushing back against fascism, and, you know, and pushing toward a more socialist society? What are your thoughts on that?
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's a tough one, my dear sister, because we had to be highly visionary to even think of what a wholesale alternative culture, society, structure, institutions, practices look like, given what we're in right now. But I think we need to have one. So I think that's part of the best of Afrofuturism, not just as a cultural and aesthetic movement, but as a political movement that's tied to art, that's tied to a very different world. And I was reading a lot of my dear brother Wilderson and Sexton on the plane last night. I didn't get in till about 4 o'clock. I was coming in from LA and had to do the Washington Journal and C-SPAN this morning. So I'm kind of going on about 45 minutes of sleep, but you all got me fired up. So I'm in very good shape, but I'm glad somebody's praying for me somewhere. But the idea of Sexton and the Afro-pessimists is, well, we really got to dream of the end of the world, because anti-Black racism, white, cuts so deep at the very core of the making of the modern world, which is during the age of Europe. Those notions between the Euro mountains and the Atlantic Ocean reshaping the whole world in its interest and in its image. 1492 up until 1945, the American Empire takes over after. Soviet Empire is there for about 30-some years, collapses, and American Empire becomes the sole superpower. And I hear what my Afro-pessimist brothers and sisters are saying. I think they've got some insights there. I don't accept their conclusions. But to think of the end of the world is to take us right to your question. What does the new world look like? Well, the new world, I think, looks something like massive community control of Black peoples, of oppressed peoples, with the wholesale decentralizing and democratizing of what used to be the monopolies and the oligopolies. It means the politicians themselves are servants of the people rather than bought off by the corporate elites in our present moment. It means the various cultural ways of life in which women and gay brothers and lesbian sisters and others can both be themselves, but at the same time recognize they're part of communities that are bigger than them. And I think it's a post-imperial world in which you do have communities. I'm not even sure we'd have traditional nation states, but we would have communities, maybe even federations, in which the voices of those Sly Stone called everyday people would shape the destiny of those communities. But you wouldn't have these superpowers that are police of the world, imposing its will, coercing other people, and extracting resources just for the 1%. So that's, that's like the Commodore Zoom, that's the favorite song of my brothers in prison, right? That's the anthem of my brothers in prison. Zoom. And what is Zoom? That's what Robin Kelly calls freedom dreams. That Lionel and Gerald, they wrote the song. James Michaels produced it. And it's this notion of just give me a chance just to dream. I want to fly away, but I like to fly away, but I like to zoom. I want to be a place where I can be myself, where I sense at home, but home not static and stationary, but the way Toni Morrison understands it. We making and remaking ourselves as we are at home, even if we can only do that in our music, in our style, in the way we relate to each other, because we ain't got no land at the moment. We ain't got no serious rights at the moment, but we still searching for that home. And it's a home in which there's deep freedom and a possibility of love and compassion. Now people say, oh, that's so utopian. Yes, it is utopian, because we're living in a dystopian nightmare. And we have to have some alternative that lures us outside of that grimness. And so that's the beginning of an answer. But the crucial thing is, no one person could ever project it. It's got to be collective. It's got to be collective. That's the anthem of Black people.
I agree with
It's
you on
lift
that. The
not
collectivity.
my voice. It's not lift my singular voice. It's lift every voice. All those voices lifted together, learning, listening, cooperating, pushing, correcting, being informed, and also being transformed in a process in which dignity of especially the least of these, the dignity of the most poor, of working class people sits at the center. And so in that sense, we've got some inklings of it in our history, especially in our music. But we've been, it's been just impossible to translate it into political and economic structures, given what we're up against.
So following up with
Does
that,
this make sense, though, Sister Coco?
Yes, I have some follow-up, but we definitely, I
Absolutely.
appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Yes, thank
Absolutely.
you.
as a somewhat follow up to the question, you talked a little bit about what a transformed society looks like. How do we get there? Do you see us getting there by, speaking of socialism / communism, seizing the means of production? Are we getting there by redistribution of wealth through taxation? How are we getting to the place where sort of a entrenched, dominant capitalist society somehow begins to change how wealth is distributed? Let's say with you as president, how do you go about doing that in a way? Like, how do you go about making sure the resources which now go to the 1% are evenly distributed? What are you willing to do to make sure that that happens if you were to be president of the United States?
Mm-hmm. I mean, one, my brother, is that I think the abolitionist impulse, which is an initial impulse, is not where you end, it's where you begin. You see, the abolition of slavery, abolition of Jim Crow, abolition of self-hatred, abolition of self-disrespect. For me, it's the abolition of poverty, abolition of homelessness. It's the abolition of massive exploitation of workers at the workplace, of which Black workers, brown and others, are a crucial part. But that's crucial because a living wage is a precondition for any of the dreams that I'm talking about. The Black community, any other community. And this is true here and around the world. So the first moment, it's almost like the first note, Mary Lou Williams sit down on the piano. Okay, I'm going to play a song called Black Christ of the Andes, the greatest jazz music ever in the context of the church. He's Catholic, right? So it's in the Catholic church. Black Christ of the Andes. First thing you're going to do is what? Start with the voices, not even a note. Yes. So that gives it a black gaze. The black voice is going to start it all. Well, so it is in politics. You see that the abolitionist impulse, and that goes from Harriet Tubman to Angela Davis. That could go from Frederick Douglass, Sister Ruth Gilmore. That abolitionist impulse is the first one that gives us a taste of the freedom that we long for, we hunger and thirst for in light of these structures of unfreedom. And once that is unleashed, then the voices are still raised. Because given the genius, especially Black folk, but of oppressed folk, we're going to come up with all kinds of different alternatives I can't even think of now, of ways in which after the abolitionist impulse is acted on, we begin to become more creative, more constructive, where the alternatives that we talk about are not so vague and opaque, but become more concrete and become more accessible and available to people. We are now at a moment of such grimness and desperation. We just trying to keep alive a memory of the abolitionist impulse.
Well, what's concrete for you then? I mean, what's concrete for you in terms of you're president, you have some control over governmental structures. What concrete things are you calling for these things to happen? You know, like, so how are you processing that this is going to take place, that we're going to move from the capitalist structure that hoards wealth for the 1% and redistribute those resources? What are the ways in which you see that happening? Even if it's a collective process, what are your ideas within that collective process to make it happen?
Absolutely. Well, for me, it's 3 moments. One is that you demilitarize abroad and at home. So you demilitarize police domestically, foreign policy across the board. Withdrawal of troops, massive resources from the military industrial complex invested in jobs, school, healthcare, education, and so forth. You decommodify those major structures and institutions that make it difficult for ordinary people to gain access to the satisfaction of their basic social needs. You got to take the big money out of the Medicare. That's what Medicare for all at its best would be. You see, you take the big money out of education, so the education becomes free and available. So you take the big money out of big tech and big pharmaceutical companies. That's the second. And the third, mainly, the third one would be as elected official. I'll put that in inverted commas, you know what I mean? I mean, you know, me being elected official would be like a jazz man in the military band. You know what I mean? Like, hey, okay, I'll play in your band, but I got some other kind of rhythms and syncopations and polyrhythms and funky beats I'm going to be playing up in here. That's what it is to be a politician coming out of tradition that I'm talking about. But the democratizing is a matter of ensuring that the people who produce the wealth have access to the wealth. And that's what I mean by decentralizing the monopolies, decentralizing oligopolies, and so forth. So that's still a kind of transformation, but it's still on the way. There's still a number of other things that have to be done. And you can imagine the entrenched interest that would be coming at the movement as we make these kind of steps means that there's going to be all kinds of different conflicts and clashes on a number of different levels. There's just no doubt about that. Very, very much so. And every effort that any Black people have tried to make in this regard, you know, you become the demonized, hated group, and you have to have some kind of support as that conflict intensifies, and that's always the very concrete dimension of it. It has to do with life and death, you know. But that's part of what it is to love Black folk and love poor people. That if you're not willing to die, then it's hard to even talk about being a free person. I mean, right. The only thing that breaks the back of being afraid of anything, of death or whatever it is a love. You know, that's the only thing that breaks the back. And you have to always put that up front, not in the spirit of self-righteousness, but in the spirit of thoroughgoing realism, because that's what you're up against. We got some gangsters and thugs that have been running this system for a long time, and they'll do anything to try to preserve it, which makes them mighty, but it doesn't make them almighty. It makes them mighty, but it doesn't make them almighty. No, they didn't intend for Black folk to overcome barbaric slavery. They didn't intend for Black folk to overcome American apartheid. They didn't intend for Black folk to take over the musical and cultural apparatus in terms of the content and substance of our music, of our style, of our ways of engaging space and time. but we did it.
Right. Hey, last time you was on here, Dr. West, one of the things I gave you credit for was being one of the greatest rappers alive. And I appreciate your philosophies and your music history. And I'm gonna do one of your moves, and I'm gonna say to quote my main man Quincy Jones, 1976, in the song called "What Good Is a Song?" He said, "What good is a song if it cannot inspire?" Right. So I
Oh,
say that to say, right. I hear, we are in a police state. We're in a military industrial complex. They say we're talking about over 900 something military bases across the world.
that's right.
How do you propose? Because I've heard you say a couple times that you would take funding away from the police, from the military, so on and so forth, and put into education, put into hospitals, so on and so forth. In a warmonger society, in a society that's built on domination, destruction, and death, in a society that's built on conquering and enslavement, I ask you, how realistic is that? Because if I don't see, again, living in the state of Georgia, I don't see white America, particularly these Republicans, agreeing with you saying, I'm going to take money out of the military. That's, to me, it's almost like we're going to disarm, we're going to take your guns back. This is the John Wayne, Elvis Presley, white supremacists, this is the power structure. That is the means of them. How do you propose that being a realistic achievement or accomplishment? I'm not doubting you, but I'm just saying, like, that's
Right.
like getting a leprechaun to be your vice president. How are we gonna make this happen?
No, that's real. No, that's real. Boy, you all always raise these powerful questions. That's why I love to keep coming back. But let's just look back in history, though. What W. Du Bois called the General Strike, where 200,000 black folk leave the plantation and join the Union Army and break the back of a nearly 244-year entrenched barbaric slavery. Who would have conceived of it? Now, that's in the context of Civil War, but who would have conceived of it? You see, in Georgia, go back 75 years. Who would ever think you're going to break the back of American terrorism, of Jim Crow and Jane Crow and lynching and so forth? It's not to say that white supremacy hasn't been refashioned, anti-black racism hasn't been refashioned, but who would think that that would be the case? You see? Well, history got something else to say. You see? So that in that sense, history is always unpredictable. But your point is still a crucial one. Well, it's still unrealistic. Well, let's look at some of these white brothers and sisters in Georgia who are so locked into right-wing politics that if you dismantle the imperial apparatus of the country, with trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars are now available, and some of those white brothers and sisters are able to gain access to resources as a citizen. We're not, because I believe citizens ought to have free health care and so forth. Now, reparations I also support, but that's in addition to what citizens ought to have. But we're talking about these white brothers and sisters now. They have access to quality education, health care, decent housing, and their lives are going to be fundamentally changed. And those material conditions can possibly change some of their consciousness, because part of their consciousness is tied precisely to the conditions you're talking about. It's a zero-sum game. We'll make sure these black folk over here don't have it. We don't have a whole lot anyway, because the folks you're talking about not part of the 1% at all. They've just been shaped by deeply white supremacist culture. And so they've been told you need to scapegoat the most vulnerable, trash the weak, as it were, scapegoat them, as opposed to confronting the most powerful.
Right. But remember, we live in Atlanta, though, Dr. West. So we're talking about where our brother Drew would say the slaves run the plantation. So even
Yeah,
with these
yeah.
white folks, like right now, it is.
But they're getting exposed. So on the Cop City thing, man, Lord have mercy.
Yeah,
If you ever want to see the black bourgeoisie exposed with no clothes on, just go to the 11-4 vote. Go to the black mayor. We saw the same thing in Chicago with Brother Brandon Johnson, right? Even Bobby
right.
Rush got paid all that hundreds of thousands of dollars to be on the side of the right wing candidate for mayor, and here come little Brandon from the trade union movement. His father's mother and father church. He's a PK, preacher's kid, progressive, takes over, and you see the black middle class politicians get exposed what they are too often, which is just these extensions and appendages of this larger neoliberal plantation. So that kinds of exposure has impact on people's consciousness too. It really does. We've seen the same thing with Obama in the last 15 years. Look where the black community was 2009 compared to where they are now in 2023, vis-a-vis neoliberal rule of Obama. Hey, he's gone from Messiah-like status to hanging out on the yachts. You ain't gonna find Jesus on no yachts. That's one thing clear. If he's your Jesus, then he's on the yacht. Something is wrong. That's a Key Sweat moment. Something just ain't right, right? So all of a sudden, the discrepancy and the contradictions become so overwhelming. Like, I thought he was like Martin King. No. Martin King is in a paddy wagon for 4.5 hours with a German Shepherd in the dark. And when he steps out, he says he can't even walk. He can't talk. All he can say is, this is the cross we must bear for the freedom of our people. That ain't Obama at all. Don't get it twisted. People begin to see more clearly the differences. We're not talking just about personalities. We're talking about human beings who have been shaped by structures and institutions that inform their witness, their service to the people. That's part and parcel of the process that we're talking about. And that affects everybody. It doesn't just affect black people. That affects everybody. So I don't want to be in any way optimistic. You know, I'm a blues man, so I ain't got an optimistic bone in my body. I'm a prisoner of hope at the core. And hope ain't got nothing to do with optimism. Ain't got nothing with pessimism either. That's what Wilson and Sexton them got to understand. Optimism, pessimism ain't even part of the central road of black people's freedom struggle. If all we had is pessimism and optimism, we'd be in the crack house a long time ago. No, we hope. Hope is an action. Hope is a consequence of your action. Hope is a verb as well as a virtue. As long as you loving and fighting and go down swinging, there is hope. That's what Donny Hathaway and Curtis singing about. See, as dim as it gets, here's the action. Sometimes the only action is an utterance and a song, just like what Quincy was talking about. And it's hard
do white
to
folks
sing
get
a
all
song
your
from
references,
your
your
soul.
music references?
You said, well,
Do white folks get all your music references when you jump in
when my
there? When you
brother
talk to
raised
white
that wonderful
audiences?
question to Quincy Jones about what was that? What say that again?
Oh, I said, do white folks get all your references when you talk music?
Oh no. Shoot, I was talking about Ted Mills and the Blue Magic just a couple of days ago to an all vanilla crowd. They didn't know what it is, but they're gonna find out. They're gonna find out clearly. I'm doing an interview with Blue Magic. You know, they got a radio station with brother Robert, because I just saw them in Tallahassee, Florida. And some do it, but they gonna find out, just like when they make references to us, we don't know what they're talking about. There's a whole lot of references to our tradition. They need to find out who Ted Mills is, and Russell Thompson Jr. and Eddie Kendricks, Eddie Holmes, and the figures who have helped keep us going. We ain't got to Aretha and Gladys yet. So it's just a matter of being honest, being candid with folks. This is the truth as we understand it, as the folk poured it into us in loving us as little black kids when we were coming along. Whether it was in churches or mosques or synagogues, on the block, in the corner, around the alley, this is who we are.
Preach. Anyway. Right on.
So forgive me, everybody. I had a number of first world problems that took me away for a minute. So forgive me if any of this has been dealt with already. But I was curious, Dr. West, if you could talk a little bit about, and if it has, we can just move on. What changes have occurred? You talked a little bit about the devolution since Obama, but what changes have occurred from your perspective that lead you to this decision to run now, as opposed to then, where it was, I'm still going to support the Democrat or Obama and then push him once he's elected? Why does that view not work for you anymore? What has led you to want to take a new approach to electoral politics in this moment?
Yeah, you know, it's a wonderful question, because I really thoroughly surprised myself. You know what I mean? If somebody had told me that I would be running for motherfucking president 5 years ago, I would have told them to get off the crack pipe. You must be losing your mind. You know, at 70 years old, shoot, I could be making my 4th album and bringing Prince back from the dead or something. But now, running for president, so that it surprised me. But at the same time, when it was offered to me, it really made me think. And this is why I do give some credit to the People's Party, because when I sat down and talked with them, with Chris Hedges, it really made me think. And I said to myself, well, who at that level is making widely available the greatest tradition in the modern world, not just for Black people, but for everybody? And that's the Black freedom struggle. And the Black musical tradition is the great expression of that. But there's political versions and economic versions and cultural versions and so forth. And I couldn't come up with anybody at all. In 2020, Bernie Sanders' critique of Wall Street and some kind of concern about working people and so forth, we figure it's the best that the decrepit Democratic Party could do. I said it's worthwhile to bring the tradition that produced me into that particular electoral campaign. And that's what I attempted to do for the last two efforts, given all the limitations, the weak critiques of militarism, hardly any anti-imperialism, distance from critiques of white supremacy, anti-racist in attitude, but not anti-white supremacist in analysis and so forth, you see. So that in that way, I figured that it's time to just go for broke. And I think that's what happened, though, man. I think that's what happened.
No, okay, right on. I appreciate that.
So
yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
So, I mean, I see this campaign as, you know, more of like a disruption, I guess you can say, of, you know, the Republicans and the Democrats and the stronghold that they have, right?
Right.
And obviously there's a lot of people that are talking about the split the vote, and, you know, that you running is kind of disrupting, you know, the norm, the everyday issue, the everyday stronghold that they have, right?
Right.
And I'm rooting for that part, right, of that disruption. But, you know, there is a reality here, right, that if you are to run, and I hope that when you do run, you can see yourself through to the end, right? Because at the end of the day, I feel like, you know, the message needs to be clear, but it also needs to be consistent.
Yeah.
And by maintaining a campaign to the end, right, would show that message, right? Even if you don't win, right? But at the same time, I do know that there's a lot of concerns, right, of what happens. And to me, it's all the same, Republican or Democrat who gets elected. But if the Republicans get elected, if Trump or just someone like DeSantis, you know, becomes president, you know, and because of the fact that, you know, a lot of votes were either funneled to you or, you know, obviously to them, and, you know, the Democrats, they clearly don't do anything. What would you say to people in that case that Republicans win? What would you say? Why was it worth, you know, voting for you? Why is it worth supporting your campaign? Because of, you know, the potential for a fully fascist state, even though fascism is already here, we are experiencing, Democrats are upholding fascism, you know, they're supporting it.
Exactly.
But what would you say to those who feel, you know, a little worried about that?
Yeah, no, and that's, yeah, you can imagine folk coming at me just at the airport the other day, trying to get through my hamburger. And 3 folk came and made the same point. Oh, we love you, brother. It's nice to see you on TV and things, but you're going to be responsible for fascism in America and full responsibility for Trump triumphing and so forth. I said, dang, y'all sure make me powerful. If I was that powerful, all Black folk would have been free long time ago. I can tell you that right now. But no, I think we have to distinguish, though, between the truth and lies. You see, and lies are always coming at you, just like bullets, if you're a truth teller and a justice seeker, right? And those are just lies. People have been fed lies. Ralph Nader was a spoiler. No, he wasn't. No, he wasn't. Gore, we know the argument, right? Gore couldn't carry his own state, his own congressional, couldn't carry Arkansas, which is his president's state. Well, Hillary Clinton didn't go to Wisconsin. Votes are voices of those persons who actually make decisions vis-a-vis candidates. And no candidate has ownership over votes at all. Sometimes Democrats end up voting for Republicans. Bush had tons of Democrats voting for him. And we know, of course, that if Gore had really recounted in Florida, if he'd gone to the Supreme Court, he would have won. He was a coward. He didn't go. Jesse Jackson Jr. and the Black Congressional Caucus said right there, some of you old enough, went right on the floor and said, we do not accept this. We are going to the Supreme Court. Gore said, no, 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 no. So that the idea that a third party candidate could take responsibility for another candidate losing is a lie. So you just have to respect the people enough to say, you know what? Just like white supremacist lies, this is an electoral political lie. You've been lied to. Let me tell you what the truth is. Jill Stein, 1.07% of the vote, yet she gets full responsibility for the election. That's a lie. Let us tell you why. So just walk it through slowly with the people, because the corporate media specializes in mendacity. Now, the truth would be, for example, if they said, well, Brother West, we went with you, and because there was no follow through, we are wrestling with overwhelming despair and desperation because it became cult-like. That was the problem with the Jesse Jackson campaigns in 84 and 88. The Jesse's so charismatic, he's a rhetorical genius at a level it's hard to describe, but as soon as it's over, he's never been a movement person. He's been much more a charismatic individual who fires people up, but doesn't render all of his unbelievable gifts of service to the larger movement. It's just his particular organization, his particular group, and therefore all of that energy collapses. Now that's something that I would have to take responsibility for. That's something that anyone who's head of a campaign must take responsibility for, and tell the people from the very beginning, this campaign is not a campaign in and of itself. It's a moment in momentum. It's not even a movement, really. A moment in a momentum of social and political momentum that can become a movement. Social movements are very rare because usually they're co-opted quickly or infiltrated and so forth. When you really have massive social movements, you got a real threat to the powers that be. At that point, you got a different level of conflict in that regard. So my response to you is, and this is what I tell the folks, I said, let me tell you why you all are an echo and not a voice. Why the Johnson brothers didn't say lift every echo. If they said lift every echo, then it'd just be expression of silos. No, you don't want black people just to be echoes. No, Monk say, Coltrane, you sounded too much like Johnny Hodges. You're still an echo. I want to hear your voice, man. Come down to the club with me. Spend some time on the couch with me at my crib and listen to this. Coltrane, Monk, that sounds wrong. Sometimes wrong is right. Oh, I see. I'll be dang. Sun Ra the same way. Eric Dolphy the same way. Finding voice, which means having the patience enough to explain to the people the lies that you are echoing and reiterating from CNN and MSNBC and they are lies.
So with that being said, you mentioned Jesse's 84 and 88 campaigns being cult-like, and you talked about building a moment. Do you have intentions on building a movement? Because you mentioned that Jesse didn't build movement. So are you suggesting that after, win, lose, or draw, that you would be looking into more of a movement building type situation? And that was my original question, but I'm gonna go ahead and roll with that one for now.
Yeah, if I could just as a shout out to the super chats, Dr. West, I appreciate it's a similar question. If we, what is the political project are people being directed to? Just in the contingency plan only shot that you are not successful.
If I'm not your campaign manager, let us know.
No, but one is that it's hard to predict, but if you are telling the truth in the very process of the campaign, then it should generate not just energies, but local figures. Because the thing about it, Ella Baker's so right that, if you really have strong momentum and movements, then you have local voices and local figures and even local leaders who become the real content and substance rather than the individual who is the center of attention during a campaign. And that's very, very important. That has to be reiterated over and over and over and over again. And that takes on its own life and logic. You see, and I think when you come in with a prejudgment, what it ought to look like, you see, well, that's part of the problem of some of our Leninist brothers and sisters in the vanguard political parties. They already have a full idea of what the vanguard looks like even before they got a movement. So they end up imposing it being too coercive in a way with they themselves already the authorized leaders of it. And so I'm critical of that, even though, of course, y'all know my love for Carl Dixon, Cesara Taylor, and my brothers and sisters in the Revolutionary Communist Party, because we've done some magnificent things together on the street and in jail and so forth. But we have deep, deep discussions about these notions of already knowing what the party looks like and the leadership and vision is, as opposed to trying to allow for voices that are in the process of coming in and in the process of becoming better leaders as they participate in these momentums and movements. But I think that has to be at the center of it, because it's just a matter, again, of the truth. It's the truth. There will be no fundamental transformation, no revolutionary change for poor people, for Black people, for working people without movements. I can't conceive of how we can proceed without massive movements. Very much so.
Now, the last time we spoke, so you're going to have to get on your website person. There was a direct ask that you put Stop Cop City, as a campaign platform. And I just wanted to scan your campaign platform. And there's another question within it, but I still don't see the Stop Cop City, which is, like you said, the premier, if I'm going to use some non-profity words, social justice issue happening right now. So I would like to ask again that in one of your areas that you include Stop Cop City. Write that one down. Stop Cop City is part of your platform. Two, when I looked at your platform, there's one area in particular that looked what I would call radical in nature, particularly your ending foreign wars and military. A lot of the other stuff seemed like something Bernie Sanders could have in terms of tone and language. How do I distinguish you from a social democrat as somebody who's more left, more socialist, more radical, more revolutionary, when the language on your platform does not convey as much as when you're speaking right now? You know what I mean? Like, so it seems a little softer than your actual speaking points right now when I looked at that language. And then lastly, there's not anything more I can grab right now. So I know it's early in the campaign, but there's not anything more than I can see right now, except a few lines there. But what's your response to that?
No, but that's a very, very fair question, because there is a disconnect between a platform and who I am, what I do, and so forth. I mean, I'm planning to go to Cop City. I'd be there physically in the flesh, speaking with the folk, trying, in fact, to make the points that indeed, if we can get as big a spotlight on what's going on as possible. Just like, I don't know whether we talked about where I'm launching in Jackson, Mississippi with Emmett Till's family at the end of August, dealing with the Jenkins Parkin, your brother Jenkins and brother Parker, mistreated by the police and so forth. We got groups already converging there. We're going to have a big town hall. We're going to be a New Hope Baptist Church. So it's a matter of what I've been doing and basically who I am, what produced me and so forth. That is a disconnect from what's on the platform right now on the internet, because that's come out of the party. The first one you remember was People's Party. That was their thing. And there's some nice overlap there, but it's not me in that sense. And now the Green Party has, which is better. But even the Green Party is different than I am, because I am who I am. I love those folk. They doing what Hall & Oates is all right, but they ain't the Delphonics, So there's a whole different way in which you engage as a person in the flesh in relation to these very, very real issues. And I've got to be much, much better, but that's why what you're saying is so fair to me. I've got to be better in trying to convey my sense, vision, presence, and so forth in the platform, as opposed to what I'm actually doing and speaking and so forth. Unfortunately, and I'm probably wrong in this regard, that I've always kind of downplayed platforms. They seem to be so flat and abstract and so forth. And you say, keep track of what the candidate is saying and doing and highlighting and prioritizing and so forth. Then they look at the platform. Oh, this is so different. I've got to make sure there's a tighter connection. And now I am going to attempt to do that. And I failed to do that within the 7 days, because I've been on the run like I don't know what, and we're still in process. Because we just still just filed with the FEC just a couple of days ago, because that was a whole process in making that transition from Brother Nick and the People's Party and thank God for Sister Jill, and especially Ojamu and Jill. I mean, both of them have been at the center of the transition. And Brother Baraka, he and I always have magnificent, you can call it learning jam sessions, where we're able to go back and forth. My brother coming out of all People's Revolution Socialist Party, he got his Pan-Africanism, he got his South Side of Chicago sensibility. And I don't exist without him at this historical moment, because to me he's a giant. But we have overlap, and we fight over our analysis here, and we learn from each other. And that's very important. And those two have been at the center of the transition, and I learned so much from both of them, Sister Jill and Brother Jamu, but especially with Brother Jamu in terms of his grounding for so long at such a high quality level in the struggle for Black people's freedom.
Foreign policy, U.S. president, U.S. policy on Haiti, Cuba, so on and so forth. How would you deal with it? Would there be any?
The first thing you have to do is, as I said, you got to demilitarize and roll back, lift the embargo immediately. Make sure that Cuban leadership is able to come at the international table, given the exclusion since 1959, 1960. We've talked before about, the pardons of, I got a wonderful note from Brother H. Rap Brown, Iman Al-Hamin, because all of the shows I've been talking about, pardoning Mumi Abu Jamal and H. Rap Brown, formerly H. Rap Brown, inviting Assata Shakur to come back if she wants to, and Leonard Peltier and Snowden and Brother Assange, Julian Assange. And I got a wonderful note from the folk there around Aman Al-Hamin. I was so glad that they were able to pick up on that and just let folk know certain folk will never forget their sacrifice and the ways in which they have been trumped up and incarcerated all of these years, that unbelievable service that they've rendered. Well, if you get somebody who's in power that has a capacity to acknowledge that, that's just truth and justice. That's truth and justice. When it comes to Haiti, telling the truth about Haiti, the reparations they had to pay to France. Tell the truth about Haiti, U.S. occupation. Tell the truth about Haiti. And then how do you provide resources? And how do you provide democratic forces in those contexts so that poor and working Haitians are able to more readily shape their destiny, you see? So you can imagine, it's the same kind of principle that I talked about before, but it relates specifically to the Caribbean. Same would be true with Puerto Rico, a decolonized Puerto Rico that has its own self-determination.
So, Brother West, you talk about demilitarization, you talk, about, freeing political prisoners, and you talk about, bringing, Sister Assata Shakur back. Um, and I think that's great, right? But I feel like what is still in place is there's still an infrastructure for fascism to still thrive here.
Absolutely.
So what is your response to, what happens to the fascists? What happens to those who are, still essentially in power, that have some form of, political power, economic power here in the United States? How do we respond to that effectively, so that we do have that capacity to free political prisoners and prisoners of war, and given that context?
Mm-hmm. But that's part of the intensified conflict that I was referring to, because you've got certain rules of law and rules of justice, so that if I were to move in and deploy power in the way I want to deploy power, and it intensifies and more thoroughly provokes various kind of responses, if those responses are outside the rules of law and justice, then they got to pay the consequences. They just had to pay the consequences, you see. This is, in fact, a process by which there is a sharing, because that's what revolutions are, but whether they're peaceful or nonviolent or violent, it's a sharing of power and resources. It's a sharing of duties and responsibilities. It's a sharing of respect and dignity. And if people are so thoroughly against the downward mobility, the downward distribution of resources and wealth and so forth, and they want to act outside the law, then they got to deal with the consequences. Now people say, "Oh, Brother West, you naive. You know darn well they're going to act outside the law. They're going to try to cut your neck off and everybody else's neck who's concerned of doing that, who's part of the movement." That's part of the conflict that will take place then. Absolutely. Because one has to be intent, one has to have integrity and honesty and courage in terms of the people you're committed to. For me, that's bottom line. That's the bottom line. But is there something else?
You're not afraid of conflicts? Are you saying that you're not afraid of conflicts?
Oh, story of my life. I ain't afraid of conflicts at all. I can tell you that. You ain't lying. Lord have mercy. When I was with Miss Louis Farrakhan, we had the Million Man March. We went all over the country with Brother Ben Chavis. Ben Chavis is now with the Labels Party. Y'all see that? No Labels Party now. So he's really migrated. He and I were at Union Seminary, and we, of course, did all we could to get him out of jail when he was down in Wilmington. What was Wilmington 7? I forget what the number was. We were marching down there in North Carolina many years ago. But, the Million Man March. Oh, my God. I walk into Harvard faculty meetings and everybody looking at you, might as well cussing you out. You the biggest anti-Semite, you Hitler's first cousin that looks like Smokey Robinson and all this kind of mess. And I'm just saying, hey, I'm concerned about black folk, and Ms. Louis Farrakhan is one particular voice. I got devastating critiques and indictments of him at the ideological level, but at the same time, I've worked with him for many years, and I ain't scared of nobody. Nobody dictates to me, and I have to ask for permission as to who I love and who I work with. So the death threats went across the board. Folks showing up at my crib, putting a gun in my wife's head and everything. Hey, this ain't new. That's all you can do to keep your rotten status quo going. That's all you can do. Hey, good God Almighty, we got a whole cloud of witnesses who've been dealing with this. I ain't special. So in that sense, no, I'm not afraid of conflict at all. Now, of course, that's a whole different discussion in terms of, working with Minister Louis Farrakhan, Nation of Islam and so forth. I had a whole lot of black progressives and so forth. They told me, Brother West, it wasn't worth it. You're going to be cast as anti-Semite for the rest of your life and so forth. I said, no.
By the way, so what's gonna happen when you have to do that again? When you're gonna get that Obama Hillary Clinton moment where she says she made him disavow his relationship with Minister Farrakhan?
No,
There's gonna be you're gonna get a version of that again, given his
Yes, Black Power
relationship to
Media.
the whole you're gonna have to disavow your relationship to BPM.
Not
They
no
got the wrong
Kalanji.
free black man for that. No, that's like saying I disavow Wilson Pickett. We tried to convince him not to go to apartheid South Africa. He wrong as he can be, but he starts singing the midnight hour. I'm gonna start moving. So that you just have to be free enough to let folk know whatever you want to trash me and so forth. I do have folk who I love. Period. And the love can include critiques of Nation of Islam patriarchy, Nation of Islam homophobia, critiques of a whole host of things, you see. But Minister Louis Farrakhan is my brother. There's no doubt about that. We've been working for 45 years. So this ain't no spineless Obama gonna get up there. Well, I don't know him. Jeremiah married you. Oh yeah, that's right. Oh, didn't he baptize your kids? Oh, you got a good point. Come on, Obama, man. Jeremiah, right? Towering figure, help keep your marriage together, and you acting like you gonna put him under the bus. What kind of brother are you? That says
Well, he threw his
right
grandmother
there.
under the bus. What's Reverend Wright?
Lord.
He threw his own
just the whole
grandmother under
Chicago.
the bus. His old racist ass grandmother. He threw her under the bus
but
too.
no, but
Why not?
Jeremiah is he's such a towering figure. I remember I went on TV and said I'd take a bullet for him, not in the heart, that's for mama, but in the arm or something. And it was right in that context at that very moment. And he called me up. He said, Brother West, you crazy, man. He said, ain't nobody standing up for me. I said, man, this ain't no courageous thing. Good God, I've known you. I taught in your church with Malefi Asante, with the Samuel Proctor a program that we had. Malefi, Afrocentric, coming at me tooth and nail. You were Martin Luther King Jr., European-centric, so and so and so and so. I said, but Malefi, let's teach together. We taught together for 3 years in the basement of Jeremiah Wright's church. Jeremiah Wright was right there with us. Why? Because we part of the same community. We just got some disagreements and things. Malefi loved me. I love him. The same is true with Maulana. I just wrote the introduction to his great book on Malcolm X. We got disagreements, but I love that, brother. They asked me, disavow Maulana Karenga? Are you losing your mind? Disavow Haki Mahabute? Have you lost your cotton-picking mind? These are my brothers or my sisters.
Did you say Karenga got a book coming out about Malcolm?
Oh, it's the best thing ever written on Malcolm, man. 800 pages. It thing is unbelievable, though, brother. Just talking to him about, yes, indeed. But I just throw that out. But I say that just because, so many times Black nationalists have been so demonized and misunderstood. And even though I'm not a Black nationalist, they are constitutive of our community and of our tradition. I don't exist without Malcolm X. I don't exist without Marcus Garvey. I don't exist without Queen Mother Moore, who was my very dear sister. She was the mayor of my town. She was the mayor of Harlem. I love that sister. And they could put me on CNN, MSNBC, any other show, and I got to disavow them just because there's a white gaze. Please. They must be losing their minds.
When is this Karenga's book coming out?
Well, I'm hoping that it'll be out probably in about 9 months. He and Haki have been working together in terms of Black Third World Press is putting it out. But it's been going through different editions. I wrote the introduction about 7 years ago and had to revise it because it keeps getting bigger and bigger. But Maulana Karenga, he's one of the towering for me, Black intellectuals who's been consistent over the years. I was just at the 50th anniversary of us. Now, I'm on the Black Panther side. I'm Black Panther to the core. We talk about 1969, LA and the shootout and everything. But Maulana is growing, developing, maturing, still telling the truth at the deepest level. And I love that, brother. And he loves me. But hey, when you get that kind of love,
I can't not encourage people who tuned in to check out our brother Sundiata's interview with Maulana Karenga on our platform. If you want to hear from Karenga's own mouth in a recent moment, his own version of that history. It is compelling and it is different. And it's right here on BPM, so people should go check that out. And if they want to hear his version. But I admit I've not read his work on Malcolm, so I'm very interested in this being the best book ever on Malcolm.
You got some joys coming. You got some real joy on his way.
I'm joking, so forgive me. It's like to me, it's like Fred Flintstone writing a book on Kunta Kinte. Anyway, I just lost him a little bit. But anyway,
but somebody put it up here real quick, and this is, I think, a very interesting question. First of all, ZZ Lion, shout out to him, one of the biggest supporters of BPM and CMB and related efforts. Please tell us what radical person who is left of you would be on your team or is on your team. I think I've always been interested in how we relate to people to our political left, and I think you've done well with that over your career. And is anyone that you consider to your left already officially on your team or being considered to be part of your team?
Well, right now, the group that is meeting weekly is my dear blood brother, Cliff West. Now, he's a deacon at Shiloh Baptist Church. I don't know whether that makes him left for me or not, but he's wiser than me. I can tell you that. He's more courageous. And my wife, Anahita, she's a Iranian sister who comes out of a revolutionary tradition. Her father was one of the great revolutionaries. Baraka, I mentioned before, Ojama. I think Ojama would certainly be left of me in the eyes of many. Jill Stein is there. And then Chris Hedges. That's the group that meets. I wouldn't call them a team. Now, in addition is Sister Nina Turner, who we talked to. And probably more and more. I've talked to her. She's trying to bring in different people and so forth. So it would depend on how one defines left of me. Probably
based on what you named, I'd say one.
You would say Baraka, you think?
Yeah. I didn't hear the first person.
I agree with that.
In the sense, Chris Hedges, he's got a strong left analysis, though.
Yeah, but he has no real black analysis, to be honest about it. We're all working class people for him. That's.
I mean, he's got deep anti-racist sensibilities, but he doesn't have the kind of racial capitalist analysis I think that you're talking about in that.
But I've heard Nina Turner speak, and although she's left progressive, she certainly doesn't have an evolved, trying to be as kind as possible position on U.S. militarism and foreign policy. And I think your position even on Ukraine war is far more left than what I've heard her say. But I also have another follow-up question. I don't want to rate your team all the way, but
let me just say this. But one of the reasons why it is so very important for me to learn and listen to you all is that in our constant jazz-like sessions, and many would consider all of you all left to me, that I'm being deeply informed and inspired by y'all. So I just want to say that, and that's not really a footnote. That's very important.
So I got a relatively speaking controversial question. It's even controversial amongst those of us who consider ourselves left or revolutionary or radical on the issue of gun control. There's gun violence, particularly in our communities, but other working class and poor communities, obviously is happening far too often, right? And everyone has access to guns without much background checks, obviously, particularly in the South, but those guns make their way up to the East Coast, they make their way to the West Coast, right? There's many who believe that the idea of gun control means that we're taking sort of the revolutionary potential out of folks' hands, particularly when the state has so much control over power and violence. But of course, there are others who are so concerned about the sort of random violence in the streets that one of the solutions that's come up with at times is how do we get guns off the street? So what is your position within those, just giving some contours to it. What's your position on gun control safety / like violence caused by guns?
Right. I've never made gun control a number one priority. Never. I was in Sacramento when Bobby Seale and the young Bobby Hutton, 16 years old, he led it. He was standing in front of Bobby Seale. And he would be assassinated April 6, 1968, 2 days after Brother Martin. When they walked in with their guns, and the response to Reagan was gun control immediately. So I knew that a discourse about gun control has so much to do with context. It has so much to do with who has them, what kind of guns they are. I think there certainly has to be certain kinds of requirements and conditions in terms of access to gun control. But I think when we're talking about the kind of killings that we are fundamentally concerned about, which is the levels of violence tied to not just drugs, but tied to self-flagellation and self-violation and self-disrespect among so many of our precious young people, disproportionate young Black brothers, I don't think guns is the place to start in one's analysis for that. I really do. That's why I'm an abolitionist about poverty. That's why an abolitionist about indecent housing. I'm an abolitionist about unavailable health care. I'm an abolitionist about not enough jobs with a living wage. That if we create the kind of communities, then we can still have access to legitimate forms of gun control without people pointing guns at each other. And I always throw out the figure, that Canada has roughly the same amount of people as California. And more Californians kill each other with knives than Canadians kill each other with anything. Anything. So even if all the guns were gone in California, if your spirit is such, you're dealing with poverty, you're dealing with desperation, shattered families and communities, you're going to find something else to kill somebody. So that at that level, I don't know where I land in the debate that you were talking about, but gun control for me is never the starting point at all. It really isn't. And I thoroughly understand people owing to the October 1966 event in my hometown of Sacramento, when the brothers walked in with their guns. And all of a sudden, oh my God, the most right-wing folk in the world were on the cutting edge, a part of the vanguard of gun control. These are the same folk now who are members of the National Rifle Association.
Definitely appreciate that answer. I think that was one of the most. I didn't think you would go there, but that's good. Thank you for that.
Does that make sense? Still, I mean, because I stand.
No, it makes total sense.
Say, rescue me if I'm wrong. I need to be rescued now. I need to be corrected. You know what I mean?
No.
No, I think even here with this differing opinion. I mean, I honestly asked the question because I do think there's differing opinions on a left radical frame about that issue, and I was just curious about what your position is on it. That's all.
Yeah, right on. Go ahead, Kalonji. Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Knock it out.
Well, I was just going to pull up some of the questions that we're getting from the super chats. We definitely appreciate them, the support of the channel, and for this conversation. Ricky Ryan is asking, how concerned is the campaign with charges against the Uhuru and Atlanta Bail Fund that pertains to funding? How would he deal, that is you, Dr. West, with domestic terrorism charges? And if I can, we had a similar question asked, if I thought I saw, there was a similar question asked, from Thanks Don Hammonds about the attacks on the African People's Socialist Party. So, what are your thoughts on either or both those comments, questions?
Well, I mean, one is I think it's just realistic to have deep concerns about domestic terrorist charges. I think it's very important to do what one can and all that one can in order to defend the rights and liberties of our brothers and sisters at the African People's Socialist Party. I had wonderful dialogue with a sister in San Diego. In fact, we were talking about the Burning Spear, the newspaper. I was able to actually to get even more information than I had before. And I had been really too negligent to be able to follow through on all of the things. I keep track of it with the press and so forth, but she's a member of the party, so we had a chance to actually talk about it. And then I saw my dear brother give a very, very powerful interview. I think it was on Democracy Now! Right after I read the newspaper, just to hear what he had to say and his whole history of going back, way back to the 60s and 70s, through SNCC and so on. And these are all, deep concerns. I mean, we have to meet them when they come, but they are very deep concerns. And I would want to lend my name to any kind of support that they would need in order to ensure that they are both treated fairly and justly, but recognize that it's part of the war against Black freedom movements. I mean, we are in a war, and we have to come up with whatever kind of armor we can and buffers that we can. Because the charge had to do with the Russian connection, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I think those are trumped up charges. He said that he went to Spain and he went to Russia, and he made a fascinating analysis comparing the two. And they had nothing, I mean, it had nothing to do with any kind of sense of being captive to the Russians. He was simply invited, just like he invited.
Now, what I even remember from sorry to cut you. Yeah, I just saying from reading the case itself, I remember looking at the case itself. When you read it, it seems silly. It shouldn't be something that concludes with this level of potential imprisonment,
repression,
and punishment,
and so forth.
Because it's like this email, and somebody may have like misread an email, or somebody sent an email to somebody, and because they were grouped in an email with a whole bunch of other people, it's like all of that's what you use, that's your evidence. And then some claim about a Russian agent using a St. Petersburg, Florida local election to infiltrate the American electoral establishment. Come on. I mean, this is
as weak as pre-sweetened Kool-Aid. You're absolutely right. And the brother, he's been such a long distance runner in the struggle for Black people. You could see it in his face. You could hear it in his voice. It's and I just don't know him that well. You all may know him much. I've never had a chance to sit down and talk with him or anything, but and I didn't know that much about the party, actually. When I heard about it, I initially thought it was a party used to be associated with the great Stokely Carmichael and Kwame Ture. I said, no, that's all African revolutionaries.
Right. All African People's Revolution. Right. Yeah, it's a different.
That's because you've been hanging out too much with Chris Hedges.
Yeah.
You say what?
I said that's because you've been hanging out with Chris Hedges too much. You don't know you got to hang out with some Black radicals, all the Black acronyms.
No, that's true. That's true. Because I just didn't know the African People's Socialist Party the way I should. You're right about that now.
But speaking of which, we do have from our comrade here at Black Myths Podcast, which airs here at BPM, a great program. Two Black is asking about some incredible work that he has been associated with in raising up the voices of political prisoners and the Pendleton 2 in particular, and is asking here about Christopher Nassim Trotter and John Balagoon Cole. Are you aware of their particular case? And then he's following up, do you have a plan to help political prisoners who are under state prisons in which president cannot pardon? I think somewhat was already addressed, but are you familiar with the Pendleton 2?
No, I stand to be educated about the Pendleton 2. Please tell me what's going on there.
So I would have to defer to any of my comrades here for the details, and I would have to encourage you to check out the Black Myths Podcast. I will send you an email after this with the link. Okay. In fact, I'll do it before we get off here, so you'll have a link to their work on the Pendleton 2. But it's another unfortunate version of people being punished for being Black, radical, and just living. That's the summary, that the basic insufficient summary I can give at the moment, because I'm not an expert on the case either, but I'll send you a link to that.
I'm going to check on and tell my brothers and sisters that I send my gratitude already for educating me on this, even before I get a chance to be educated, because this is, I need to know about that. But the other question had to do with political prisoners who
right.
could not pardon, let's say. No,
right.
One is that we just had to cast a major limelight and spotlight on that and talk about them wherever we go. Of course, with Mumia, good God, that's been going on for what, 30, 40 years, and I've been blessed to write 2 of the forewords to his works. And with Christopher Hedges, went up to see him with James Cone, and spent 4 hours with Mumia Abu-Jamal. We were singing Curtis Mayfield together. Mumia can sing in tune. I'm working on it. But he's a free black man. He's a free black man at the highest level, and I love that, brother. And the same was true with the H. Red Brown. I was blessed to write an afterword for the pamphlet they put out 3 years ago. And I mention him as often as I can, just to put a spotlight on it, and then connect it to their roles in the Black freedom struggles, going all the way back to the 60s through conversion Islam and so forth and so on, you see. That to me is one of the crucial things we can do. But when we get our hands tied to leverages of power, though, we got to wield them. We just got to.
I know you said you wouldn't move into the White House without everybody having a house, but I don't know if you feel the same way about motorcades, but I do think even if you don't have the official legal capacity to pardon somebody, seeing a presidential motorcade pulling up in front of Mumia's prison, Jamil Alameen's prison, on a regular basis, even if you can't just say they got to, it might, it would be must-see TV. I'd be interested in watching that.
Wife, that she's a professor. She spends most of her time dealing with precious folk who have been incarcerated. You've got the justice scholars and so forth. And, it's a family affair, Sly Stone says. And to have people in your family who also cast a spotlight on prison conditions, especially for women, political prisoners. She's worked with Angela Davis. She just had a wonderful a book of poetry out. Sister Angela wrote one of the blurbs, actually. But to put a spotlight on political prisons in general, and especially the sisters as well as the brothers. So it's not just me, myself. It has to be a broader collective kind of thing in terms of doing all that we can to tell the truth again, and then to try to see that people are treated with justice. Very much so.
Brother West, I do have another question for you.
Sure.
So, as someone who is a new African nationalist, I do believe that revolutionary nationalism is a solution to a lot of our issues, especially when it comes down to, political prisoners and justice, right? So I know that you have mentioned your perspectives on reparations, right? And so I do, I have my criticisms, obviously that there is some forms of reparations that are a little bit narrow. But as a new African, we believe in lands and independence as the struggle to be, had. Considering the history of enslavement on this land, and the fact that we continue to see that form of enslavement in different iterations, right? So what is your response to reparations, and how do you see reparations as a solution to to the issues of new Africans or Black people here in the United States?
No, indeed, appreciate that question. Well, one is that I've been blessed to be part of the reparations movement for almost 40 some years, going back to the 1970s, and was there with my dear brother Randall Robinson, who just passed in Virgin Islands, God bless him. He founded Trans-Africa. We used to meet actually every 2 months with Charles Ogletree and a whole host of others, trying to come up with both the legal front and reparations. Remember, we even pushed the case in Tulsa, but we lost, but it got a serious discussion in the culture. But you remember when he wrote the book, The Debt, that was one of the texts that served as the basis. The same is true with Brother Raymond. He was then at Fisk University, put out the collection of essays on reparations. And of course, William Doherty and the others have been at this for a long time. I don't think reparations, again, is a solution, just like electropolitics will never be the major vehicle for Black freedom. It just won't. It's a moment. I think reparations is just a moment. but it's a very crucial one, because there's no way you could be committed to the truth about the Western Hemisphere or the truth about the United States without talking about slavery as the economic foundation, the precondition, and the prerequisite for Europe industrializing. Cotton picked in the South, went straight to the Lancashire mills in Britain. Britain becomes the first nation to industrialize based on the free labor of our ancestors and so forth. So that's tort law. That's damage. What kind of repair relative to the damage? Well, let's find out. Well, people done some serious work in this regard, coming up with trillions of dollars and so forth. How could I not? If I'm committed to truth and justice, how could I not be committed to reparations, you see? But again, I wouldn't say solution. I would say it is one moment in the attempt of African peoples to be treated as human beings with dignity and sanctity that we have. And so that also would have to mean California right now, as you know, they got the legal process going on, and I've been blessed to have some connection with that. And of course, I get in a lot of trouble around my dear sister Yvette and brother Antonio with ADOS, because they pushing for reparations, but they've got all kinds of challenges and so forth. And I was there with them at their first conference and pushing for internationalism. They don't have to be against the Caribbean and voluntary immigrants from Africa and so forth. But reparations I'm committed to. So we've got overlap. And they kind enough to bring me on in with my internationalism and listen to it and then still try to respond in their own ways and so forth and so on. And this
well, let me stop you for a second. They're not kind enough. Yeah, they're not kind enough. They're using you to gain credibility because you have a name and stature. So they're not doing you any favors. You're actually doing them a favor when you go there, particularly if you disagree with their politics. So I know obviously based on prior conversations and who you are, you extend relationships to people who you don't agree with.
That's right.
However, there's got to be people in certain camps that are reactionary and actually anti your politics that I would think you would have to have, this is my opinion, sort of a more discerning view of where you give your credibility to. Because I do think you going there and standing with them, considering their anti-African stances, is not negative on them, but negative on you, right? Because of who you are. So I just wanted to challenge you on that.
I got to co-sign that, Dr. West. I'm sorry, I got to co-sign that and just add a little bit that I have a very direct experience with both of them, going back a number of years from very early on in their careers. They are fraudulently placing themselves as being concerned in a radical way with the condition of Black people in this country, and they are not. They are cloaking themselves in radical language, progressive language, to cover very white supremacist conservative politics. So I know you are, just as Kamal was saying, you are willing to work with people that you don't necessarily agree with, but I don't think you are quite aware of to the extent to which you would actually disagree if you were to engage with them beyond the version of themselves that they present to you to get just from you what Kamal was saying. So I see.
Anyway, I see what you say. I mean, I've seen where I have deep disagreements, but I haven't seen the fraudulent thing yet. I really haven't. But maybe I just
there's a lot to there would be a lot to go into to flesh that out. But it basically deals with them being connected to very white supremacist foundations, organizations.
In terms of where their money comes from?
In terms of money, political relationships, platforming, the all kinds of conservative Black spaces. They're connected to one of the early one of those nonprofits that, going back to the 1990s, was using Black organizations to promote anti-immigration for white supremacist community groups. So there's a lot that I don't have right in front of me at the moment, but there would be a lot to get into that. Would make more plain my argument, my claim, at least. So yeah.
No, I hear what you're saying. But when you get somebody like Darity and others, I mean, one, I don't have a whole lot of credibility.
But they don't have Darity anymore. They fell out with him too.
Well, yeah, that's true too. But I haven't had a chance to spend that much time with him. But the time that I have spent, we had a genuine dialogue, and I was hoping that maybe I could bring some kind of view, not just to them, but to the large number of Black folk who were there. Because you got Black folk passing through, going through all kinds of things. People come through the Nation of Islam and end up revolutionary Marxists. Well, one of the reasons why they passed through is because somebody in the context of the Nation of Islam talked about the socialist side of Malcolm or something. So the people are in motion. A lot of the young people fired up around reparations could be attracted to ADOS. They say, oh, Brother West is talking about internationalism. He talking about critiques of capitalism. He talking about C.L.R. James. He talking about the boy. Oh, maybe I need to check this out. Next thing you know, 5 or 10 years, they're ready. Brother West, man, I'm now still kind of leftist, and I used to be part of that, and I outgrew it. I matured. That makes a difference, too, in terms of trying to reach out and having a presence where the people are. Because it's not just them, but that conference was packed there in Louisville, Kentucky. And you had preachers there, and wonderful preacher there. I mean, not one, but a whole wave of, and so you can have an impact on the church, because the church gets fired up for reparations, so they can start there and end up in a lot of different kind of places. Well, for me, that's what it is for the Lord to use you. That's what the grandma never was talking about. Just let the Lord use you, child. You ain't in control of this stuff. You ain't got to agree with those folks. You just go in there and bear your witness, and you could have impact on them. And later on down the road, they end up hanging out with the revolutionary.
Yeah, but Dr. West, a broke clock is right twice a day. We get that. But at the same time, we got to keep in mind that, confusion is still confusion. And, where the people see you at, some folks you may win 1 or 2 over, but then, the rest may look at you like, well, well, what are you on? Because of the fact that when you are denying brothers and sisters from throughout the diaspora, selling them out, as your man James would say, for chicken change, it doesn't look good in the grand scheme of things. I think that where we are today, we have to be a united people. And I think one of the things that you were talking about with your campaign is building a united front. So the thing is, it's like we can't sacrifice the whole because of 1 or 2. You know what I'm saying? And I understand that, a lot of times, we say, well, man, look at the numbers. There's a whole lot of people up in there, so on and so forth. There's a lot of people at a Young Thug concert, but that don't mean that, that's going to change the political landscape. I wanted to ask you, one of the questions I had was around environmental issues. I think that, of course, with climate change and environmental degradation and so on and so forth, I think that a lot of quote unquote politicians have ignored the planet. You know what I mean? And one of the things that's important to me, of course, we talk about political prisoners, we talk about police terrorism, so on and so forth. But if the planet ain't right, then we don't have to worry about none of that. So do you have any thoughts or ideas or policies towards, these corporations who are working to destroy the planet as a whole?
Well, I think the demilitarizing and the decommodifying goes hand in hand with the decarbonizing of the air. And you can't do that without trying to cut back on fossil fuel. You can't do that without trying to get corporate greed under some public oversight. You can't do that without putting people first rather than just the profit. So in so many ways, the ecological crisis has to do with corporate greed running amok, though, brother. They are the ones who are squeezing land, air, water for profits with very little concern for the satisfaction of basic needs of people. And it's no accident that, again, you can see the coincidence of the ecological collapse on the one hand and the white supremacist practices tied to predatory capitalist ones, because be it the continent of Africa or be it in Black communities in the New World, we are disproportionately impacted by that ecological collapse. And so again, that vision and that analysis needs to be put forward. It needs to be put forward. But I think the challenge for all of us, though, and I know it's getting late because I got another thing to get to, and we're going to rearrange another one in dialogue with y'all. But this issue of how do we relate to organizations or collections of peoples who we know are confused, could be thoroughly misleading, and yet we know in so many ways those are still our people. See, the folks at a Young Thug concert, that's still my people.
Oh yeah.
The folks at Mount Zion Missionary Baptist Church, who's homophobic and patriarchal, they're still my people. They're just wrong as two left shoes. And they need to be confronted. They need to be corrected. They need to be continually challenged. But how do we still sustain that connection so that we don't feel as if the unity that we're talking about is one that could not somehow embrace them as they undergo the kind of transformation required? You see,
some of that involves, I would say, some private conversations. I think if you appear on some public platforms with them, you offer them critiques within us. And again, I think your capacity to do this is greater than folks like ours, right? Because of who you are. But you can engage people in what you would term loving critiques on public platforms so that folks can be clear about what your position is as you try to show people and win people over to new positions without necessarily just having a huge fight that's good for television but doesn't move people over to certain political positions.
Right.
I think you're somebody who, again, we've had discussions with some of those folks in debates, but they don't go well, right? Because they're not looking to win us over or to have us on or something like that. I think you have certain abilities because of who you are as your platform, that if you do use them wisely, of course you can win them over. But if you go to an event that's meant to be an event which boosts them and you only praise them, then of course they're your friend. But again, I think it diminishes your stature and who you are, because it looks like to the rest of us who are seeing it that you're not offering sort of a critical love, as you stated earlier about some of the other organizations and individuals that you care for, but instead it feels as if you're endorsing their platforms and who they are and their ideas. When you, again, my assumption is that there's a lot of rhetorical devices and politics that they have, and again, some of this you may not know, who has served them and given them resources, which leads a lot of us to believe that they are not a true necessarily reparations organization that's steep in the nature and history of Black people both here and across the world, but they are serving a purpose of divide and conquer, again, whether they all know it or not.
No, I can appreciate that. I mean, Brother Jared's point about fraudulent, and my dear brother Kalanji's point about what do we mean by unity? There couldn't be more important questions than that, because unity can't be promiscuous. You just can't bring everybody in just because you love Black people and you got all kind of different kind of Black folk out there. You have to have some kinds of criteria in that sense. But at the same time, you also have to have some insertion, as it were. Because see, even when I was there in Louisville, I hit them hard in terms of internationalism. I told them if Malcolm X's mama from Grenada and Tom Bell, who wrote the great song from the Dramatics, is straight out of Jamaica, and if Stokely is from Trinidad, and if somehow they're not your comrades, then how could you be a claim to the Black freedom struggle? And I just said that publicly. I said that publicly. It wasn't a private thing. Now, they could say, well, West going to say that because that's just window dressing. It might just spill off. But at least in that concept, you can't do more than, you got to do much more than just praise. You got to go in there and be yourself. We talk about Garvey. There is no Black freedom movement in the United States that doesn't acknowledge the genius and love and service of Garvey, even though I got my critiques. And that's Amy as well as Marcus. So in that sense, you're trying to educate. Because a lot of times, you know, the folk who are there, they just not as educated as they ought to be. They haven't read certain things. They haven't been exposed to certain things. That's all of us to some degree. So in that sense, you know, you all are having me rethink this, but this is how I'm just responding right off the top of my head in terms of trying to insert ourselves wherever Black folk are, if they're making some effort to uplift and empower within their own narrow and sometimes much broader ways.
Thanks for that. Well, I certainly appreciate that. And we will be here on hand, ready to help you anytime you want a little advice.
Let's get
or
another date.
some you know.
I don't want to dominate things, but if we can get
come
another
with
date,
it.
just have a regular thing, though. Is that all right?
Pull the calendar out.
We'll
Let's
set
go.
up another one. We could say 2 weeks from today if you want, but we'll definitely
That's
follow
wonderful.
up. If I can, I'd like to squeeze in one more, because at least one more if we got a minute, because Renee Johnson
But that
has
is
been,
at 11 o'clock, though, right? 11 o'clock LA time.
Yeah, 2 o'clock. Yeah. 2
What are we
o'clock.
doing?
11, yeah.
You got if you got even 3-5 more minutes.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Renee is asking here, and big shout out to Renee, and I've just invited her to a post-West review if she's available. But Dr. West, on your side, is helping to determine who is on your side, helping to determine a path to ballot access in the process for making you available to voters nationwide if you are on the ballot for the Green Party. So ballot access for the Green Party.
Absolutely. There's a brother named Rick Lass who was able to put the Green Party on 48 states. We got the same brother who's able to do that. And we're already on about 18 and 19. He says we'll be on another 22 within a month or so. You know, so many places, 5,000 signatures, 7,000 signatures, and so forth and so on. So it looks very good in terms of ballot access. The question is going to be, how do we reach out to the folk who don't vote at all? How do we reach out to folk who understand that all this talk about ballot is not a matter of fetishizing the ballot, but it's a weapon that's connected to much, much broader social forces and social movements. But I think that would be the my immediate response to that ballot access question.
Okay, right on.
But I want to thank you
sure,
all,
go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
One of you, for spending all of this time and really having the patience with me and able to allow me to take so much in, to learn, listen, reevaluate, and re-scrutinize where I have been and where I am, because this to me is very important. It really is. It really is.
We appreciate
right on.
And Sister Coco, what a blessing to meet you.
Yes, likewise. I appreciate you being here and having this opportunity to have this conversation with you, because it's important, you know, to get to the root of these issues. So thank you.
That's so very, very real.
We appreciate your commitment to the people for decades, and probably like at least a half a century plus, right? And we're looking forward to seeing you. That's July 12th. I
got it in my black book.
Okay.
No. Wait. yeah. Okay, right. My bad.
There's Wednesday, July 12th at
July 12th. Oh, you know what though? Good God, I got a colonoscopy. Well, that's probably TMI. That's too much information. Y'all don't need to know all that. But
no, we talk about that here. I just had one a couple weeks ago. So we all about that here.
How was it?
And ain't that
to be honest with you, it was my second one, and it was not as good as the first one because they put too much air in my colon. So I woke up. It was a little bit rough. It was a little bit rough. So talk to the doctor about how much
TMI.
Air. Hey, we talked about it already. I mean, we got to do this, especially black men. You got to go in there and get it done.
I got to think colonoscopy on both days, but I mean,
yeah.
If the Holy Ghost hit me, I can just go on and keep talking even after I got my thing, though.
No, the first time I was good 30 minutes later.
The what? Thursday? The 13th? Why are we looking at Thursday the 13th?
Is that all right?
Come on, she's like, let's change this subject.
Hey, Thursday. Hey, you got to do it.
TMI.
With all due respect, I don't want to hear about what's going on up in y'all.
Come on, man. So the Thursday.
But
we can make it work.
On the 13th, is that cool?
Yes,
I think,
Thursday 13th.
yeah, we can make that work, and we'll put the
That's
host
beautiful,
together
and I'm
for it.
writing
Yes,
that
indeed.
in right now.
Okay, Thursday 13th, 2 p.m. or 11 your time. How easy this is.
So it'll be 2 p.m.
Definitely.
Eastern time, 11 a.m.
So
West
it'll be
Coast,
11
right?
a.m. LA time and 2
Right
o'clock
on.
indeed. Well, you all stay strong and never underestimate the impact that you're having, because you're having strong impact on me. And if you have 1/3 impact on others, you're having on me. You were forced for good in the deepest sense of John Coltrane's language. You know what I mean? Love supreme, concretized, fleshified. Doesn't get any deeper than that.
We need to get you a music show on here, Dr. West. Yeah.
I'm telling you.
The Cornel's Corner. That sounds pretty good to me. What do you think?
I love
Right
it.
on
I love it.
BPM.
But I got to run on. I got a 12:45.
All right, Dr. West, thank you very much. Appreciate you.
strong,
Take
but
good
I will
care.
see
Much
you on that day
appreciated.
after we won't go into the name and things, but on that Thursday.
Yeah,
Right
good.
on.
Glad we gonna be talking about your colon, but be safe. We're gonna be all right.
Indeed,
All right,
indeed.
peace.
Y'all stay strong.
All right,
Right on,
Appreciate
brother.
take care.
Yes,
Deeply.
All right, take care. Peace.
So listen, forgive me to my comrades on here, but I forget for jumping the gun. I don't know what your schedules are like. I got nothing else going on. So I invited Renee Johnson to join us for a post-West review. I don't know if you all cool with that, if you all want to stick around or have the ability for that.
I got about a good 15 right now, so
Yeah, we can hang out for a little bit.
Yeah, so because Renee been on the case for a minute in terms of the Green Party, the People's Party, and all of that, and offering up some good commentary. So I thought if we want to have a few minutes to reflect, and she had the time, and it looks like she does, we could go ahead and bring her up and start off by asking you, Renee, what's up? What'd you think? How we do? What's the grade?
running through the house.
Look, I know I was trying to figure out like the best, because this last minute trying to jump on. I just walked in my door, was listening while I was driving, which is probably not the best idea driving home. But I actually y'all did a good job of like refocusing, which I can't even tell you how much I appreciate it, because my man, Dr. West, God bless him, I love him, but he talks in metaphors and similes, and sometimes trying to follow his path while he's talking, I get lost in the words, right? So having the follow-up question that says, wait, let's circle back and kind of contain this into exactly what I'm trying to get an answer to. That's really, it's appreciated in a way that I can't fully express, because a lot of people don't do that, right? A lot of people will allow the circling and the ongoing and never actually circle him back to force him to answer the question that you actually asked. So I appreciate that. Y'all did a good job. It's good.
Hey, we got a hate from Renee, y'all. I saw the last time. She was like, they didn't ask about this, and they didn't ask about that, and they damn sure didn't ask about that. So I was
no,
like,
that wasn't me. I said he got on
okay.
late and y'all didn't have time. That was not me.
Okay.
I don't know who that was, but it was not me.
Right on. But we appreciate it, definitely.
No, Yipper's giving the credit to Coco, and I'm not mad at that. I'm not mad at
get
that.
no credit anyway, so
We don't get no credit.
Yipper.
Kamal was coming hard too. He was like, no, I want to know about this. And I'm glad you forced him to answer about the website, because I know that his website is a direct mirror of the People's Party website right now. And the People's Party website right now still has his picture on it and says Dr. Cornel West is running for the People's Party. And so, one of my issues with the fact that he's not really paying attention to these things, which I think he sees as like small details, I don't know if it's occurring to him that there are people going to that People's Party website because they heard that initial announcement, or because they saw whatever whatever People's Party is posting, and they're clicking the donate button, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're clicking the donate button because they think they're going to be helping Dr. West in some way, and he's no longer running with them. And I wish something like that would be paid a little more attention to, because, those are real people and real dollars and working people giving up their money. and they
Mhm.
think they're giving it to one thing and they might not be. And I think that's something, the fact that he was like, oh, it's not really connected. Like, that's something that you should be working on, because a lot of people, like, people will go to the websites first, right? Like, if you
If
have
you're a
access to
candidate,
that,
if you're a candidate, that's the
thing,
first place I
right?
go to check out your platform. So,
Yo,
I mean, that's
Cornel,
like,
Come out
your
with the
mic
come
is
out.
so loud.
Got a megaphone next to his mic.
what is wrong with my
I
mic
keep
these days? I don't
saying, yo, in the
understand.
chat, I'm like, turn your mic
I
down.
thought I did.
Be
Like, Hawk, is this better?
loud.
Is this better?
Dr. West. Like,
Is this
God,
better
That
or
shit
no?
is loud. Yes, thank you.
Dr. West, what do you think about?
I'm glad I can now
Why
just
he
say
left.
something and just like, go hard.
Yeah.
Trying to be subtle before. Now I can just.
Oh, by the way, we were corrected. Diallo was the one who apparently we so do we think Dr. West is ready for a Diallo hosted interview, co-hosted interview?
I don't
I don't
know.
know about all that.
Because I feel like Diallo going to start challenging his religious beliefs and shit like so. I don't know.
Right.
You are a Christian, and
You're
you
going to ask him if he beats his kids and stuff like that. It's like, I just don't know.
Oh, right.
Yeah, we need
Ask
Dr.
the
West
chat. I
back.
see a whole bunch of no's in the chat. He's a no, nah.
But it might be good. He might be too good to ignore in terms of having the interactions or whatever. I would purposely not come on so that I could watch with popcorn. So
Maybe you could just have Diallo write his questions down, and then.
Oh no, I think he wouldn't go for that. And to be honest, I wouldn't even be mad at him for not going for that. You can't.
I was just
you
joking.
can't censor me.
Yeah,
Because
he'll have 8,000 follow-up questions while he's in the middle of answering the first question.
Yeah, exactly.
And the chat is demanding it. If the chat is wanting
chat is the chat is definite. The chat definitely wants. I mean, we pay Diallo so much. I don't know if he'll come on. We can't afford to get extra time. Like, we only pay for the couple times a week. I'm telling you, I don't think people understand Diallo's rates and what he's charging BPM. Like, I don't know if we have the bank for that.
Is that what
One
we
question
got?
I'm just playing. Let me ask you also. I'm curious what you all think, because there was a question that if we had more time and maybe when he comes back, I would. Because I've been in a number of different spaces on these YouTube streets and people have actually emailed me some things about this question of him talking black and sleeping white in reference to his current spouse. Do you all think that this is even? I mean, is that even? Where do you all fall on raising that kind of question, or even if it's? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I personally wouldn't go there. I think that's kind of. I don't know, man. I think that, people's bedrooms are their bedroom. That's just me. I mean, however y'all get down, do your thing, don't involve me. That's just my whole particular piece. And I don't know what his spouse looks like or whatever. I haven't reached into that particular pocket. I think he says she's Iranian or.
Yeah, so I'm not clear either. I'm not trying to, but I was kind of curious because I've seen a number of discussions in Black spaces about this. And I do remember, and I know this is different because Obama is biracial, but his I remember that study from I think George Washington University in around 2007, 08 of a survey of Black women, and they said overwhelmingly at the time that had Obama not been married to a Black woman of a particular complexion, even that they would not have been able to vote for him. Now, I know these are two different situations, two different people, but to see this still coming up in some of the spaces I was checking out, I thought it was interesting.
I'll quickly. I'm going to have to run, and I know my microphone is bothering everybody, and the lawn is being outside. But I think that's completely true. That partly what got the Black community far more excited by Obama was when they started to see who he was married to and his kids, because he was an unknown entity nationally in the Black community. Cornel West actually stops off from an opposite point of view. He's a well-known entity in the Black community, obviously for media and stuff like that. Maybe not like in the streets, but people know who Cornel West is. I do think Black folks will be disappointed when he starts going on the campaign trail. Not to say, again, I don't believe he has any chance of winning, but when they see him going on the campaign trail and his wife, his significant other, is not Black, whether or not, it's a fair political issue, it is going to play into a culture of who he is and relates to, for Black people. And I think Black people have a right to make some aesthetic conclusions based on who folks partner up with in terms of their relationship to the larger Black community. Sure, even if she's Iranian. So yeah, she's non-Black. So that's my point. If she's non-Black, I think Black people will respond in a certain way. And I think that's, I don't think that's a question to ask him. You know what I mean? I don't think it's like,
well, and to be clear, I wasn't meaning to raise it as if like to be in a critical way, like have him justify and explain himself, but just as a way of having him respond specifically to this segment of a Black audience that is raising these questions. How does he? Because I'm sure he's
yeah.
I think, but anyway, but I hear you. I was just curious.
I would honestly say that to a less credible platform. I think that
all right.
We're not. It kind of comes off to me, and I could be wrong, as reactionary or narrow. You know what I'm saying? Because I mean, we have biracial people on the platform. You know what I'm saying? It's like that doesn't. I mean, shit, you come out. Yes, it's like that.
But I get it. But well, again, it's different. But it's also. But I'm not mad at being asked certain questions given. Right. How I present in the so that's why I'm saying it's cool.
And I would say honestly, even with Cornel, I come at folks how I come at them when it comes to what we're dealing with, but I grant certain people a level of respect, basic respect based on the work and their contributions. You know what I'm saying? Now everybody might not be at the same page, but we at least got to be in the same book. So if he was like just someone that was on some BS or whatever, I still view him somewhat and I guess rightfully so in some type of form of eldership. And you don't necessarily have to agree with any and everybody that's talking, but at the same time, unless he's coming disrespectful, I just think that that's kind of like, you're if you ask me about my personal life, you might get cussed out. You know what I'm saying? I hate to see. That's just me personally.
No, I hear you. Sorry, go ahead, please.
Well, I mean, the only thing I'd say is he did bring up that she's part of his like weekly council meeting. So I don't think it would be necessarily unfair to ask, like,
Jill
what
Stein
kind of like, right. Well, and we should be asking about all these people, like what information are they bringing to the table that's kind of guiding him along this process as he determines what his platform's going to look like, who he's going to talk to, what he's going to talk about, what he's going to uplift, those things. For me, it's not really about where she's from or what she looks like as much as what is her input going to be as far as, molding his campaign and molding his strategy and pulling together the things that are going to be, put out there as he's talking to people and as he's going out and trying to, gain support from different types of voters. That would be the question for me that's more relevant, from his wife being on his team or whatever. Like where she's from is irrelevant. Now that's coming from someone who is not married to a Black person. So I also don't want people asking me like, well, what about these things? But, I don't think, for me, that was not a relevant thing at all. Like I didn't really care who Obama was married to, and like that stuff is not really important to me, but I am interested in what information they're bringing to the table to help guide like his policy and where he's going.
And I hear the criticism. I mean, from Majamo and others, I hear but anyway, I do.
Yeah. And I understand what you're saying. What your question is, it's not, and my response is not to attack your question, but at the same time, I think that, again, we're on YouTube, right? And I got offended one day because, someone referred to me as a YouTuber. So they thought they were being nice. Like, oh yeah, he's a YouTuber. And I was like, fuck you say? But you know what I'm saying? I'm like, because it has these connotations and we don't want to look like a lot of these other narrow platforms. I know. That's just kind of how I see it.
I guess the only thing I'm thinking is that if we know certain segments of the Black community raise certain questions, and someone presents in a certain way as a spokesperson for the Black community, that they could be that, and I'm also thinking it in context of seeing him. I forgot where I saw him do that. Maybe it was here, responding to a question that was put put indirectly from Umar Johnson. So I've seen him engaging in other spaces, those similar kinds of questions from that segment of the community. And I was just thinking, anyway, so that's all right. It's all good. I don't mind being criticized. It's all good. It was just, it was just something to consider.
Should we really take a question from Umar Johnson about Cornel West?
But again, so again, my thought process is maybe not clear. Go ahead, Coco. Go ahead.
I get your question, right? Like I get that the potential for this to come up is something that you're kind of curious to know, like what are people's thoughts, because this question is probably going to come up or has come up or will come up, right? And the fact is that, you know, it doesn't matter, right? Like that, you know, he's supposed to be, you know, like to me, I don't think it matters, right? Like as even as a new African nationalist, right? Because there are new African nationalists who are not Black, right? Like that is a thing, right? Like that we have naturalized, you know, nationalists, right? And so like when I think about these things, I think that these things are not necessarily important as much as, such as what Renee was saying, is the politic, right? The politic is more important in this case than, you know, someone's skin tone or, you know, and I think perspective and where they come from, you know, has an impact. I think, you know, where she comes from might impact her perspectives on, you know, how Black people in the United States and their perspective, right? There might be a gap there, right? That is potential. And I think that that's important to understand because she does not have the same experience as us as African people. But she also has an experience of probably of some form of oppression that, you know, we have to recognize. And it would be good to know who she is, you know, and I think that is valid and relevant here. But I don't think, you know, the fact that he's married to a woman that's not Black should be the like most prominent thing that we, you know, criticize.
No question, no clear. And again, I'm thinking of part of what I'm thinking of is in terms of, because I look, even in the chat right now is being argued. And I know that when I go to my classroom in the fall and bring up all of, you know, West's race and all of this and the campaign and the election, all that, students are going to come into my classroom having listened to Umar and all these other folks. And I'm thinking, wouldn't it be nice? Part of my thought process is, wouldn't it be nice to have a documented, clear response from West that checks those kinds of questions, or that checks the criticism that would come from him, come for him from that. But that's cool. I didn't, you know, it's that's it. That's it. It was just, and obviously it was not brought up today, and it wasn't, you know, I thought to bring it up maybe at the end of a 2-hour discussion. So I don't think, you know,
I mean, yeah,
especially what's being said about me in the chat's a little going too far, but it's all good. I just, you know, I'm just saying.
Well,
it's all
I'm glad it wasn't brought up, especially after the last interview when Kamau said, you know, you're not going to win, right? So I think that, you know, after this, we should definitely, you know, I mean, I'm glad the man, he wants to come on again. That's cool. You know what I'm saying? We raise whatever questions we have, whatever issues, and we move forward. And I think that, you know, we should definitely, you know, yeah, it's cool. You know, we can, you know, joke and all that type of stuff. But I think that we want to make sure that we, as a platform, that we come off as sharp and precise and concise as possible with our delivery and our level. You know what I'm saying? As far as what it is that we're trying to, you know, give the people. You know, that's just my thing. And I think that, you know, someone happens to super chat some shit like that, they want to put in like $4,000 or whatever, you know, we post the question, you know what I'm saying? Put it up there. You got you.
Like how bad do you want him to answer this question?
You know that you really want that question answered? But otherwise, man, I'm just like, you know, I think that's kind of the sidetracking of the sleeve. And again, I love African women. That's different. You know what I'm saying? They ain't got nothing to do with my preference. What he eat don't make me use the bathroom, you know? So if that's what you're into, then knock yourself out. That's your own personal thing. And I kind of look like, I think that it's funny because I ain't even gonna go there right now. But anyway, we'll leave it at that.
So it's all good. We you know, there were, you know, were there any other questions that you thought, or topic areas that you all thought, or anyone in the chat thought we should have gotten to, or that we should get to next time that we didn't get to right here? And I would also be curious, because I will admit, I have not been watching that many, particularly on I'll be honest, on platforms that I'm already mostly familiar with. I have not watched any other of their interviews with West, where I have looked for discussion about this campaign and him are on platforms I'm not familiar with, which is in part where I'm coming from with this last question. But in addition to the question I just asked, should we raise next time? Have any of you or anyone in the chat seen him engage a question or a discussion on another platform that you would like to see held here, maybe differently?
I got to tap out right now, family.
Okay.
Appreciate it. You know what I'm saying? We the dopest platform. So wherever you was interviewed at, it don't
Right,
really matter.
exactly.
You know what I'm saying?
Say that.
Coco, can you remind them? Tell somebody. It's
I'll
Black
keep him on
Cloud
his
Media.
toe. I'll remind him. I'll keep him up
Like,
there,
thank
you know.
Good God.
I got
Renee,
you.
help us out here. What's wrong with our brother Jared? Check his temperature.
What are you talking about?
Platform. You know we the dopest platform on.
I said that.
Oh,
That's why I
man.
said if he
Oh.
did something on another platform,
We don't
obviously we
care
would do
what they
it
did
better.
on nobody else's platform. This
I'm
the
just
platform.
asking. Obviously, people
This
watching
is
them
it.
other.
I'm
Okay.
not with you, man. Yo, I appreciate y'all.
Peace,
Love and respect.
Kalanji.
Peace to the chat, and we'll catch y'all next time. One love.
Right on. Thank you, Kalanji.
Right.
Peace.
Peace.
And Burn. I saw your chat. Your question was one I was just going to get to when Dr. West left out on the issue of Muslims and the war on terror. So we'll maybe pick up with that one first in a couple weeks. But Renee, I'm sorry. I think you wanted to say
Yeah.
something.
So there's these ongoing conversations, and one of the reasons I like that you all kind of narrow in on this is this: my brother, I love everybody, we're all together, that plan, which I will admit concerns me. I recognize that as he's running for president, he has to talk to everybody, but the level of, like, how do we put it, like willingness to like embrace these people is what makes me nervous, right? And so I feel like exactly what you said, that sometimes in his effort to talk to everybody and to love everybody, he almost gives like credibility to people that really should not be able to say that he's aligned with them, right? And so there was a conversation recently between, and I don't know how much trouble I want to get myself in here. So there was a conversation on YouTube between two people, and they were discussing basically like, he needs to go and talk to, he needs to go and talk to everybody. Like, this nonsense where you don't engage with certain people. You got to engage with, the Boogaloo Boys, and you got to engage with, and I was like, oh, like, why is this the topic of conversation? And so his love everybody mentality, I think, opens him up to that type of conversation, which in my opinion, one, can really put him in physical danger, right? Like, Dr. West around the wrong people is not going to go well, no matter how much he loves them. But secondly, I take issue with people who believe that you can automatically dismiss the isms, right? You can dismiss people who are sexist, racist, like all those things, and just work with them anyway, because, the bigger thing is the most important thing. And so for me, I'd like some sense of understanding. He said it a little bit, that you have to bring these people around, you have to teach them, you have to educate them, which I agree with, because if people are open to that, then obviously that's the path you want to take. But I also feel like there has to be some level of real understanding that you can't do that. Not everybody wants to be educated, right? Not everybody wants to not participate in those behaviors. Not everybody cares to learn that their own biases are actually counterproductive to moving forward with other people. So how do you work around that with somebody who openly says, like, I love everybody and I want to work with everybody and I want unity? Like, I have no interest in unity. I want solidarity, right? I want someone who believes that my safety and the things that are important to me are as important as the things that are important to them. And I see a lot of people talking about it, but I don't know that he's fully I don't know that he's fully pulling that this is the conversations that are happening in other spaces. And I would be curious how he responds to that.
I fully agree with that. And I'm I don't want to keep going back here, but in some way that's a little bit a part of the reason why I was even willing to engage the previous question, because if you go away from that and you go to, as he said during this interview, trying to build among those who are either on the left or don't vote at all, those are the kind of questions you're going to, that's the mire and muck you might have to deal with on some level. And they would want to have some sort of, for them, substantive response for. But that's what I would rather see happen. I would much rather see West's campaign address itself more to the disaffected Black and brown and world majority communities that are either far left or not voting, or far left and not voting. And I would also like to see an effort to try to galvanize those disparate left groups who run either what are dismissed as protest or maybe defined as protest campaigns, to see if there could be some unity. I know there's been issues with the Green Party and other parties, on that basis, but this is a moment, as he was saying, that could be used going beyond even just the Green Party's evolution. Then I'd like to see that effort more, certainly, than wasting time, as you said, risking his life to build with the right and the, but to that extent, I'm actually confident with the Jamu's involvement and from what I heard from Jill Stein. Anyway, sorry, Coco, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I agree with that perspective. Like, he's a little too liberal in his, like, he wants to meet everyone where they're at, right? And I think I heard him speak on Palestine, and I feel like he hold on a second. So I feel like he said this. He said, what did he say? He said apartheid-like state, and I really was irritated by that, right? Like, I mean, let's call it, because he speaks a lot, as we all know that he speaks a lot on Palestine and so-called pro-Palestine, but to say apartheid-like is to diminish the actual experience of Palestinians, right? And to, and then to, go again, speak on this, like, we can work with some Zionists. And when we work with Zionists, right, we recognize the Israeli state. And when we recognize the Israeli state, we continue to diminish the Palestinians and their right to claim back their lands that was stolen not that long ago, right? And so I feel like there has to be a little bit more concrete, a concrete understanding of what the struggle is in Palestine, and really, not be so liberal when it comes down to, being cool with the Zionists, right? Like I think that no compromise, right, is, he has a little compromise in him. And I think I would like to see that no compromise develop a little bit more when it comes down to these issues. Because again, when we're compromising, we're saying that, I mean, white supremacy we cannot compromise on white supremacy. We cannot compromise with fascism. Like, these are no compromise issues that we're experiencing. And when we compromise, then we continue to be just as the same as the Democrats and the Republicans, or more like the Democrats in perspective. So that's more or less where I'm at with him, is like getting him away from the, like, let's work with everyone. I know there has to be a little compromise, but like, what is it that we're compromising with is important.
That's a good point. So at least we know, at least once a week when he's meeting with his crew, he hears no compromise, no retreat from a Jamu, right? So we know he's here at least.
I hope so, yes.
Renee, anything else that you wanted to, reflect on real quick from this one? Yeah.
I might text Kamal, just because I don't know if he knows, but the nosy one. I went and digging into the forms that were filed with the FEC, and his political action campaign people, like his group, they're banking with Wells Fargo, which blew my mind a little bit, because I was like, he might have a little problem if he's going to be touting Stop Cop City if his bank is the bank that's building Cop City. So I don't know. Like, I was told I was being too picky, and maybe I am being too picky, but I just feel like, those things, like, that's a real that's a real contradiction in my opinion, right? Like, if you're going to be actively fighting about something, then you can't be,
find
in
a less
right.
blatantly egregious bank.
Just the thought, right? Like that, and I know all banks
That's
are
a fair
corrupt, all
point.
big banks are corrupt, and I know, but I'm like, but they literally are like on the list for Cop City and the Atlanta Police Foundation. So for me, that was like, I was like, I wouldn't have come out and knew that. I meant to text him and I forgot.
Yeah, maybe they could at least do a credit union, or maybe dare I even say a black bank. Maybe they could team up with Killer Mike and Green. Oh no, that's not a bank. It's just a platform and an app.
I fell for that trap too, man. I fell for that trap. I'm mad. I'm still mad about it, but whatever. It happens.
Well, the more you watch BPM, the better it is for you and everybody and everything. So that's all. I
agree.
So Coco, you've been suggested as BPM's representative on West's team. So
there you go. That's
and I agree. Not that that's necessary, but Ajamu, shout out to you again, Ajamu. Is there no need they need to know that, Renee. So feel free to go beyond what you said here. Let them know. It's there now. Now they know.
It's out there. I said it on Vanguard yesterday. I said it here today. I've covered my bases.
There it is.
It's up to people to to look deep.
I was going to ask him about Ice. I did. We didn't have to. Maybe next time. If he's been paying attention to Ice Cube and the whole rightward move that he's making in his attempt to save the big three. But anyway, that was pretty interesting. Anyway, anything else from anybody? Anything? We good? No. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I just think for us, this is we have to remember that Cornel West is still trying to get on the ticket, right? And so, like, what does that work? I would like to know, what does that work look like? What does he need from the people to, to push that forward? And then what does he need once he is on the ticket? And what does that look like? And I know that the ballot access is a big, topic, a big issue. I know Black Agenda Report had an article on that. But like when it comes down to like mobilizing people, but I think in this case, I think it's an opportunity to get people organized, right? But I would like to have that, a little bit like where he sees that and how does he see, mobilization versus organization and what all of that might look like for his campaign. So I think those questions could be relevant next time.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's. So I knew he was going to answer in part with that because Dr. Stein said it when you all had them on, that, they have this person, but he's also a very different person than Jill Stein is. And they are also right now, I know they don't technically say that he's the but that's the only person they're talking about. Right. And so this ballot access question that I think people are very I don't think people understand how hard it is to get on the ballot across this country because every state has a different rule. And
the Democrats in every state work against third parties more than the Republicans. So, yeah.
Right. And, in states where you had to run somebody for governor in order to even have a chance at ballot access, like that window's closed, right? So you have to find another way if you're not already on the ballot in those places. And one of the reasons that I was so outspoken about the first choice is because they didn't have people, right? Like for all that they're saying about, oh, well, he was able to get Jill Stein to do this and do this when she was running, that was also 2015, 2016. That was a long time ago. Like people are way more disenfranchised now than in my opinion, than they were then, right? And so there's a lot of groundwork that needs to be done. So, I appreciated that he was at least, he knew the person, which is what I was curious about, was did he know the person that Jill Stein mentioned when she was on the show? But I don't know, like, it goes back to the same thing, like the website not being complete. Like, I don't know how much of a ground game he's prepared for. And I don't know if he fully even understands how much work this is about to be, because it's not really about him right now. Like it's about the Green Party right now, which is even more difficult, So there's a lot. There's a whole lot. And I have one question in my mind that I wish I could like sit in a room and ask him direct, because it's not really I don't know that people care about the answer, but I care about the answer. And so, I don't know.
And what's the question though? What's the question though? But all right, that's okay. Well,
I can tell you the question is, for a long time when people brought up that first decision with People Party, he would talk about the distraction and the problems, but he never actually acknowledged that it was a problem. Like, it was always, I don't want to be distracted. They had their own issues. I wasn't really aware. I can't recall in all his interviews him actually just saying, I took issue with the fact that there were issues with racism in that organization, that the person who was running it had been accused of, sexual harassment. And instead of dealing with the investigation, he booted people out. I don't want to be involved. He's still calling him Brother Nick. For the people who were harmed in all those different situations, that's a tough, it's tough to watch somebody be what I consider to be slightly dismissive of some really serious problematic issues that were going on. And I really wish that I could pin him down and just get him to say, you know what, you're like, I hadn't thought about it, but that is messed up. That stuff shouldn't have happened. And I do feel badly that people were harmed. And that is part of why I walked away, is because I don't want to be associated with that. But I don't know, one, if he'd actually answer that way, which I think would bother me more. And two, it's such a small situation with the amount of people that were involved, because the People's Party really was not that great of an organization. It wasn't that huge. I don't know that it's important enough for it to be a major question that's asked. So I may never get an answer, because I don't know that anybody would ever actually pin him down on it.
Well, we'll see. Stay tuned.
Always
July
do.
13th. You never know. Coco, you good? Anything that you want to bring up? Anything else? Anybody?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, again, this is the beginning stages of things, right? So we have a lot to, uncover and figure out, like, how is he relating to the people? How is he relating to the most impacted communities? Where is he drawing lines? Like, why, when are we going to start drawing lines? Because I think it's important to draw those lines. Let's not talk about colonoscopies. Let's talk about reparations, or even, having a concrete understanding of what reparations should be about. I think, Dr. West definitely needs, to have that conversation, and really learn about some of these issues that, because I think, to me, there is this, I feel like he's more concerned about diversity than, concerned about, the Black nation itself. Right. And so, like, I think I can see that, and I feel that, and I don't like it. I don't agree with it. But at the same time, I understand that, the Black nation is not enough, right, for him to succeed in this campaign. Right. And so, like, we understand those things. But at the same time, I think, Black people in America, however way they identify, are tired of their issues not being at the forefront. Right. And so if he is talking on this, he has to be very concrete and direct about, how his campaign is going to serve Black people. And, we can talk about mass incarceration. We can talk about all of these things, but people are concerned about their material conditions. Right. And people are concerned about, what it is like to be Black in America, and the fact that the fascists and are continuously making it very difficult for people, whether in the North or the South, to actually live and survive. So, like, what is his concrete campaign for those issues? I want to hear that. I want to know that. I want to feel that, because I do feel that there is an opportunity for him. I do feel that there is an opportunity for him to really secure that vote, and to secure, and regardless of how people identify, whether they're soda or anti-soda, whether they are, a nationalist or communist, a socialist, whatever, right? I don't think communists might not get on board, but, I do think it's important, for him to do that. So.
Right on. Well, Coco, Renee, thank you both very much. Big shout out to Kamal and Kalanji and Ear Doctor as well, and all our other BPM comrades and all the great folks here in the chat. Appreciate you. And thanks for all the super chats you all gave. Renee, you included. Thank you very much. Yeah, we'll be back here, by the way, with Cornel West again on July 13th, same time, 2 p.m. Eastern, Thursday, July 13th, and back tomorrow morning with more Remix Morning Show and a whole bunch more on the platform. So make sure you have the bell clicked, linked, rung, whatever, like, share, subscribe, do all those things. And we will say peace to you only if you're willing to fight for it, as Fred Hampton used to say, and catch you next time here on Black Power Media. Thanks, everybody. Peace.
Peace. Free the land.